Hey guys, it's Mandy. This video is going to be everything I did wrong in real estate this year. So unfortunately, it's going to be a rather long video. If you don't know my story already, my dad got really sick about 3 years ago now. And so I quit my job to come home and take care of my dad. Actually both my parents had been veterinarians. My mom still is a veterinarian. But on the side, my dad had rental properties, and he actually had about 20 of them. So it wasn't just like a small hobby, it was kind of a big hobby. My mom never had anything to do with the rental properties. She was fine with my dad doing it. He could kind of do, whatever he wanted with that, but it wasn't something that she was interested in. She's more of like a plant person and working in her garden and things like that. And so a lot of the houses she never even saw. And so after my dad got like very suddenly sick, and he requires full-time care now. He is almost like someone with very severe Alzheimer's, and basically he got really severe brain damage. So he doesn't really know what's going on, and he couldn't help us with the rental properties anymore. And at the time, like when it first happened, we just kind of didn't even care about the rental properties, right, for like the first year. If a tenant had a problem, they would just call the vet clinic where my mom worked, and then one of the girls at the front desk would hire someone to come out and fix whatever problem it was, and then they would write the check and give it to the contractor. So we just didn't even have anything to do with the rental properties for like a year after my dad got sick. And houses would become vacant, and my mom would just call our real estate agent, and she would sell the houses without us ever even seeing them. So that's how, well, first of all, my dad was really sick, so that was our priority. And then number two, my mom never wanted anything to do with the rental properties, and she still didn't. So after about a year, I kind of took over like crisis management of the rental properties. I started doing like organizing the maintenance and stuff like that, and then when one would be vacant, I would get it ready to be sold. So that was about 2 years ago. Now at the beginning of this year, I actually kind of took a different take on it, and I thought, my dad, like right now we can take care of him at home, but he's very hard to take care of, and he's not really getting better. He's almost getting worse. And so his like physical, he can't do anything for himself, and like he can walk, but it's getting harder and harder to get him out of bed in the morning and to just take care of him. So eventually I'm going to have to leave home. I'm actually getting married this year, so I can't stay here and take care of my dad forever. And then it's going to come to the point where my mom won't be able to take care of him eventually, and we're going to have to look into putting him into a care facility. So if we had the rental properties, they could pay for that one day, because that's very, very expensive. It's crazy. If you've never looked into how much like a nursing home costs, it is absolutely crazy. And until my dad got sick, like I thought like our healthcare, it's just crazy how expensive everything to do with like health and care and everything is. It's crazy expensive. So I thought, if we have the rental properties, at least they could help cover the cost of the nursing home one day. And I brought this idea to my mom, and she's like, okay, that's fine, but you have to manage everything. Like I'll just give you the rent houses. We can use it to cover your dad's care if we get to that point, but they'll be yours. You will inherit them. And so, yeah, it's yours. So basically she signed them over to me. So I'm really new to all this, and I made quite a few mistakes this year. So number one, my model with the rent houses is this. We buy a house that needs work. We put the work that it needs into it, and then we rent it out to a great tenant. And I think that's the thing that I'm best at, is tenant screening. I think I'm really good at finding great tenants, and I've put a handful of tenants into our houses now, and they've all been excellent and just fantastic. So I haven't had any problems with the tenants that I've personally put into the houses. And then, if that tenant rents from us for at least 2 years, and they've always paid their rent on time, they've been a good tenant, if they're interested in buying the house, I will owner finance it to them. Now, this isn't something that I just offer to them, but it happens. We live in a small town, so people kind of know that we do owner finance houses sometimes. And so our tenants will often come to us. And I say often, I mean, we have 5 owner finance properties right now. So it happens. They come to us and ask if we'll sell the house to them. And if that happens, then I will do it. So I make a little less money that way. It's for real passive income. People think that being a landlord and renting properties is passive income. It sometimes can be, but also there's things that go wrong, and it can be a really big headache. But when you own or finance a house, unless they back out, like they stop making payments, it's completely passive. And here's what I've done wrong. I owner financed the house to the tenant for way too low of a price. There's no way that I can replace that house for the money that I owner financed it to that tenant for. So basically, my dad bought the house when prices were at like a rock bottom, and he paid $25,000 for the house. It needed $10,000 of work immediately, at least 10. I have records of 10,000, but my dad didn't always keep like the best records. So at least $10,000 of work before we even put a tenant into the house. And so that's $35,000. Now, the tenant that lives there currently has lived in that house for 3 years. Or he had lived in it for 3 years before we owner financed to him. And so 3 years of rent, like, that's decent, but it hasn't paid for the house yet. And we've replaced the air conditioner in that time, and all the other like smaller maintenance things, like replaced the sliding glass door because a rock hit it and it broke, and just like some smaller things. And when he moved in, it had all new flooring, and so it's like a nice house, a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, small house, but nice. And anyway, my mom and I talked about it, and we decided that we would owner finance the house to him for $35,000. Thinking back now, even that was way too low. I really shouldn't have gone any lower than 40, because right now the market's at an all-time high, and I can't replace that house for less than 50. So I really should have went with at least 40, and even that would have been a good deal to the tenant. But he came at me with, I know how much your dad paid for this house, and I've lived here for 3 years, and I calculated how much rent I've paid you, and it's been a lot. And I should have said back to him, yes, like, you have paid that much in rent, but only a portion of that has actually been profit for us. We've covered all the maintenance and the taxes and the insurance. And regardless of how much we've made off rent, like, we had a contract, and you agreed to pay that much in rent, and I agreed to keep the house in, nice, livable, habitable condition. And I did my part, and you did your part. And because you're a great tenant, I'm willing to owner finance it for 5% instead of our normal 6%. But I have to, run this as a business, and I can't replace the house for what he was wanting, which was $30,000. I really need to have the 35, or I should have said 40, really. And anyway, I didn't say any of that, and I actually agreed to owner finance it for 30, which is just way too cheap. I thought that he would be really grateful and thankful, because that's a crazy good deal. Like, you can't buy a house for cash for 30, much less owner finance a house for 30. And especially one that's in good condition. Like, it didn't need any work. We'd done all the work to the house. So I agreed to 30, and he wasn't thankful at all. Like, he thinks that I'm just making a ton of money off of him. And what he said to me was, I calculated how much interest I'll be paying you, and it's a lot. That's what he said. I mean, I can't lower the interest any more than 5% because if I borrow money, I'm gonna have to pay interest. And actually, next week I'm closing on 7 houses, and I am taking out a loan for that, so I do have to pay interest. And no one's gonna let me borrow money for free. I can't let him borrow the money for free either. It just, I don't know. But what I learned from all that is personal and business should be kept separate. So I can like the guy, I can think he's a really nice guy. He kind of like sweet talked me by telling me how great of a guy he thought my dad was. And my dad was like an excellent, like the best of the best. My dad was awesome. And so it kind of like pulled at my heart that he talked really nice about my dad. But that's fine. Like, I can think he's a good tenant, I can think he's a good man, but business is business, so I have to keep that separate, and I have to run my business like a business with the intention of making money. And honestly, I owe it to my other tenants to do that, because if I'm not making money, I can't continue to provide rental properties in our area, and our area has a huge shortage of houses to rent, and it's a big problem. Like, people don't have places to live. The next big mistake I made, I get a call from one of our other tenants, and she says the addition, like the sunroom on the house, it looks like the ceiling's starting to leak. And so I'm like, okay, yeah, let me call someone. And basically, just as a little background, I do inspect the properties yearly, but this house, the front of it, the roof looks pretty good. The back of the house where the addition is almost, it's not a 2-story house, but that's up like twice as high as the front of the house because it's on a sloped yard. And so you can't see the roof above the addition unless you're on top of the roof. So I didn't know what it looked like. And she said, it was looking like the roof was starting to leak, and the roof was a little older, so I was like, yeah, it probably does need replaced. And I wasn't happy with the people my dad had used to do roofing. It seemed like we just had a lot of problems with leaks even after the roof was replaced. And also, they really didn't want to do roofing anymore. They wanted to do remodeling, so it almost wasn't really even an option to hire them. I asked on Facebook for recommendations, and I didn't really get a clear consensus. I got a whole bunch of different people recommending a whole bunch of different roofers. I called my realtor, because usually she knows who the best contractor is for whatever job it is I need done. And I called her. She says, I honestly don't know what to tell you. We just don't really have a good roofer in this area. So I'm like, okay, great. I look at the recommendations I've gotten on Facebook. I look at who I trust the most, and then I take their recommendation. I call that guy. Basically, just to make a long story short, I call 3 different roofers, and they all tell me they'll come out and get me an estimate, and they never do. I call them back, still nothing. And so I ended up calling each one of them like 2 or 3 times, and I could never get anyone to actually give me an estimate for the roof. So I don't know if they took a look at it and was like, we just really don't want to do this roof, or what the problem was, but I couldn't get anyone to call me back. And the roof, it is a little bit, actually it's a pretty weird roof. It's a very poor design. At where the roof normally would have the peak, it's flat there. So it has a flat portion, and then it goes down like a regular roof. So I happened to be having flooring replaced in another house, and I was telling the flooring guy, I was telling him how I couldn't get anyone to come out and do the roof on this other house. And he goes, oh, no problem. Like, I know someone, they'll be out. I'll have you an estimate by the end of the week. So he stayed true to his word. I had an estimate by the end of the week, and the guy that gave the estimate, the roofer, he was a licensed roofer in the area. People had recommended him to me, but also people had said specifically, do not use that guy. And so I kind of knew, like, in my gut, don't use this guy. But I thought, well, I'll give him a chance. And also, I don't really have another option. Like, no one else is lining up to do this roof. So I approved the estimate, and 2 months later, I had a new roof on the house. It rained, and the roof starts leaking on the main part of the house. It was not leaking on the main part of the house before. The addition had been leaking, but not the main part of the house. So I call the roofer. He comes out and fixes it. It rains again, and the roof is still leaking in that same spot. I call him again. This time, it's leaked so bad that I have to cut a hole out of the ceiling and tear out all the insulation because it's wet. But the roofer, he says, you know, he fixes it again. Well, I'm not really that happy with his repair job just by looking at it, because I just paid him for a brand new roof, and now I have a brand new roof with tar slathered all over it. And in my opinion, roofing tar should be used on a really old roof to like prolong the life for a little bit. How long is it really gonna last on my brand new roof? Is this gonna hold? I don't know. And number two, it looks terrible. You can see like a big patch of black tar. It's not even straight. It just like a smother of tar up there on my brand new roof. It looks horrible. So I'm not that happy. I don't think it's gonna hold long term. And you know what? It doesn't even hold through the next rain. Like, it rains again and my roof is leaking again. So at this point, I don't call that roofer back because I know he can't fix it. I just don't trust him, and I mean, even if he does fix it to where it doesn't leak in the next rain, how do I know that it's gonna last more like a year or two down the road? I don't think that it will. So my normal maintenance guy that I use for just like everyday stuff, he's like, Mandy, let me go up on the roof. Let me just look at what he did. So he calls me after looking at it, and he's like, this isn't gonna hold. This is terrible. And I'm like, okay, well, who do I call? Like, just tell me who to call to fix this roof, and I'll do it. I don't care if I pay for a whole new roof. I just want it to stop leaking. And he goes, well, I can do it. And I was like, I don't know. I think I need to hire someone who has experience with flat roofs. I just don't know anyone in our area who does. And he goes, Mandy, I'm telling you, I can fix this. And so I'm like, okay. And I just felt pressured into hiring him, even though I knew I shouldn't do it. He's not a roofer. So I hire him. It rains. The very next day after he finishes, we had a ridiculous amount of rain this year. But anyway, he fixes the roof. The very next day it rains, and I get a call at 5 o'clock in the morning that the roof is leaking, or their ceiling is leaking everywhere now. So not just in that one spot in the hallway, but everywhere. So I'm about ready to cry at this point. I get over there at like 6 in the morning. It's pouring down rain. I'm up on the roof looking at what's happening, like climbing up in the attic, looking at where the leaks are. And basically the spot that my maintenance guy fixed was the spot that had been leaking. That spot was no longer leaking, but everywhere around it was leaking. So I'm like not happy, and I put so much money into this roof by now, and I have a giant hole in the hallway, and my tenant is not that happy. Now, I did refund her rent for that month, so she got happy, because I was just like, look, I'm so sorry. I'm trying to do the best I can. This is absolutely ridiculous. I know it's ridiculous. Here's your rent money. So she was happy with that. Because I didn't know what else to do, I called my insurance company and I told them what was happening, and they're like, okay, well, all you have to do is just hire the right person. Here's his number. So it was that simple if I had just asked them to start with, but I didn't think to ask my insurance company. So I call that guy. He comes out the very next day. He tells me what the problem is. Basically, on the flat part of the roof, they had put new flashing, and they had like put screws down onto the top of it. The water was just running underneath the flashing and underneath the shingles and underneath the tar paper and just running right into the house. So it wasn't that they necessarily did a bad job on the shingles. They just didn't know what the heck they were doing with the flat part. And I mean, they told me that wouldn't be a problem, that they knew what they were doing, and I just trusted them, but I shouldn't have. So this guy says, look, I don't have to replace the whole roof, I just have to fix this flat part. And I have a 2-month waiting list. Normally I would never jump anybody to the front of that list, but I knew your dad. He was a really great guy, and I want to do this for him. It looks like you're having a huge problem here, and I'm sorry that like you've been through all this. I will fix this roof for you tomorrow. And he fixed it the very next day. It doesn't leak. It's fantastic. And he charged me the same amount that my maintenance guy charged to fix that little tiny spot that he fixed, but this guy fixed the whole flat part, and it actually held, and he actually did what needed to be done. So what I learned from all that is, if your gut tells you, oh, you really shouldn't hire that person, then don't hire them. Like I'm learning to trust my gut, and I'm learning that when I don't trust my gut, bad things happen. So I now know who the only good roofer in our entire town is, and I will never hire anyone else. And I actually went back and told my realtor, I said, look, this is the guy that people should be hiring. And she said, oh yeah, I actually did hear that he's really good. He's just kind of expensive. And I was like, oh, I wish you would have told me him to start with, because a little bit extra cost up front, like that would have saved me so much headache and tears and money down the road. So that was my second big expense. And instead of having like a $6,000 roof, I now have a $12,000 roof. So those are like the 2 big mistakes that I made this year. There's been some other like smaller things. I think this video is just already too long. Next year, in 2020, hopefully, you know, I'll do a better job. So if you are curious to see how I do in 2020, go ahead and subscribe to my channel, and I will keep you guys updated. Thank you for watching this video, and please let me know your thoughts. Thank you. Bye.